You have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
Well, hello there, and welcome once again to Ask a Lawyer here on CP24. I'm your host, John Scholes. Joining us momentarily, Lior Samfiru, employment lawyer from EmploymentLawyer.ca, is going to be filling you in and educating you this next half hour about your employment rights. We're smashing those employment law myths and leaving you walking away with more in your head, better defended and better capable to defend yourself in the workplace, whether you're an employee or an employee. You always learn lots on this show, right? Always ask you and encourage you to reach out, no problem, to Lior and his team. 1-888-861-4555 is the number. Ask at EmploymentLawyer.ca through email, and simply EmploymentLawyer.ca. That would be the firm website. Always useful, and feel free to go there anytime and learn more and reach out to Lior and his team as well. Mistakes employers make because they just don't know any better. That is going to be the main topic on the show today. But first, Lior, we always get to the week that was, a matter that came across your desk, as you like to say every week. What do you got for us, pal?
Always great to be here to talk about employment law and to try to solve and demystify some of the problems that people may be facing when it comes to workplace rights. So if you're dealing with the workplace problems, if things are not perfect for you, something's happened in the workplace, this is the time, this is the show you really need to pay attention for, because we have rights. You have rights. We all do in the workplace. Employment laws are actually quite good in this province and across Canada. People sometimes don't understand what those rights are. Well, I'm here to tell you what your rights are. If you lost your job, if you're worried about losing your job, if your boss gave you some sort of an ultimatum, if your job is changing, maybe you're being bullied, harassed, mistreated in the workplace, what do you do? Who do you talk to? We'll go through all that on the show like we do every week, so very important. But of course, there's also the next step. If you want me to roll up my sleeve and get to work with you and for you on your workplace situation, we'll give you that contact information throughout the show so that you can reach out. But let's get going with that. Let me tell you about a situation that came across my desk. Now, John, this is a very common situation. I had someone call me. They lost their job, unfortunately, and he was calling me because his boss told him when he was let go that this is a restructuring, they're getting rid of the role. Well, he found out within a couple of days of losing his job that his boss was not being honest because they hired someone else for that role. So clearly it's not a restructuring. So he called me saying, well, can my boss tell me that it's a restructuring when it's really not? Is that legal? That was his concern. There was really no other concern that he had. So what I explained to him is, yes, your employer can let you go even if the reason is not the real reason. If they don't give you a reason or the reason is not truthful, usually they can let you go as long as they pay you proper compensation, proper severance. So in talking to him, here's what I found out, John. Again, he wasn't even expecting any of this. He was owed about 10 months severance. He was offered 3 months. He was owed his unpaid bonus for last year. He didn't think he was because he was let go. He was owed a bonus going forward for the 10-month severance period. He was owed about $6,000 in unpaid overtime. He was owed about $1,500 in unpaid vacation pay. All those things he was owed, and he had no idea about that. So he was calling me about one thing, and it turns out that he had entitlements in 4 or 5 other categories. Well, the reason I'm telling you this story is you may have significant entitlements that you don't even realize that you have, especially if you've lost your job or are about to lose your job. So do what he did. Call. Okay, get some advice, understand your situation. You don't want to find out when it's too late that now you've given up your rights without even realizing it. That's why it's so important to make that call.
Man, absolutely worth it for sure. Again, 1-888-861-4555 is how you do that. As well, Lior and I have been hosting radio shows across this country for a very long time, around 10 years, including News Talk 1010. You'll catch us Sundays at 1 p.m. doing our thing for an hour. There's an opportunity during that hour for you to call in and ask your questions as well. And who knows, maybe one of your phone calls will end up on this show. And we're going to get to our first call from the radio show right now, Lior, so listen up.
I'm a sales rep, about 7 years, mid-40s, and half of my take-home pay is commissions. And sometimes our jobs that I'm working on, they go sideways. And so my employer decided to basically punish sales reps by not giving them their commissions, even if we get these jobs, because they're saying that, well, their profit margins are lower than they expected. They're not going to give us our commissions on that. Just wanted to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, it's completely wrong and completely, illegal for an employer to do that. Your employer can't just decide to change your compensation structure by saying, well, now we're not going to give you commissions. Now you're going to be on some other form of compensation, regardless of whether they have a reason to do that. In this case, well, we just don't think we're making enough money. Okay, fine. You still can't change the terms of employment. Anytime your employer changes something as significant as the way you get paid, even if the dollar amount itself doesn't change a whole lot, if the structure changes, that could result in what we call a constructive dismissal. Constructive dismissal happens when there's big changes to terms of employment. You can treat that as a termination. You don't have to accept it. So in this situation, this person can say, no, that's not cool. I'm not accepting that. You've terminated my employment by changing my compensation structure. Now you have to pay me severance and I'm gone. Now the question, of course, becomes how much severance? For that, of course, we're going to go and use our severance calculator tool, because I want to show you how you can do that as well. We're going to go to EmploymentLawyer.ca, use our severance calculator tool. You can do that at home as well, and let's see what that gives us. So this person has been there for 7 years, 46 years of age, not offered any severance because the company thinks they could just change his compensation. You see on the bottom there that he's owed easily right around 8 months of severance because, again, this is a termination. It's a constructive dismissal. You could do the same, whether yours is a constructive dismissal or a regular dismissal. You can go to PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca to assess and determine how much you're owed.
And by the way, that website Lior just mentioned, PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca, free and absolutely anonymous, so have no fear diving into that and using that severance calculator. We'll take a short break. Mistakes employers make because they just don't know any better. That is coming up here in just a moment. In the meantime, that number to call out, use it, 1-888-861-4555 and ask@employmentlawyer.ca. We'll continue. Lots more Ask a Lawyer is coming right up.
You have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
All right, welcome back. Thank you so much for sticking around through the break here on Ask a Lawyer on CP24. I'm your host every week, John Scholes. With me, employment lawyer from EmploymentLawyer.ca, and that would be Lior Samfiru. You can reach out to Lior and his team, no problem, 1-888-861-4555. Email is ask@employmentlawyer.ca or the firm website, which is simply employmentlawyer.ca as well. Okay, Lior, get into our topic. It's a good one. We could spend 5 shows on this topic, but we got about 5 points to get through, and that is mistakes employers make because they simply don't know any better. Number one, a big one, when firing employees, employers only provide the bare minimum, the Employment Standards Act minimum of severance. It's a little bit.
So it seems like often we're picking on employers maybe on this show. The reality is many employers, maybe even most employers, are not bad. They're good, but they make mistakes because they don't know any better, not because they want to hurt their employees. So we want to address a few of those very common mistakes. And probably the most significant one, at least in terms of dollars and cents, is the one that you mentioned. When they let go of employees, they only pay the minimum entitlements. In Ontario, we have a statute called the Employment Standards Act. The Employment Standards Act only outlines the minimum termination entitlements that someone is owed, not their full entitlements. Full entitlements are much, much greater than that under what we call the common law. Unfortunately, a lot of employers don't make that distinction. They don't know that there's a difference. They think that the minimum entitlements are the full entitlements. And that could be the difference between paying someone 8 weeks and owing them 24 months of severance. Huge common mistake that employers make. So for employees, understand that distinction, understand that you have greater entitlements than the minimums, and that's why we created our severance calculator, of course, which you can find at PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca to find out the real amount.
All right, Lior, mistake number 2 that some employers make quite often is putting an employee on a temporary layoff thinking, it's okay to do, especially in the last couple of years, right? Huge.
A lot of employers make this mistake. They believe that it's legal. Again, we're going back to the Employment Standards Act that says employers can temporarily lay off employees, except what they don't tell you is that that can only happen if an employee has agreed in an employment agreement to be laid off temporarily. Most employees have not. Therefore, your employer does not have a right to just put you on a temporary layoff. In most situations, it's not legal. That results in a constructive dismissal. So we have employers believing they can do that, putting someone on a temporary layoff, and then realizing, wait a second, by doing that, it's as if we've terminated employment. Now we have to pay these employees their full severance.
Talking about some common mistakes that employers make because, they just don't know any better sometimes. And this one is not distinguishing between an independent contractor and an employee, right?
It's easy for employers to believe, and many do, that just because you call someone an independent contractor, they're an independent contractor. Just because you're paying someone like an independent contractor, you don't withhold taxes, that makes them an independent contractor. I've had many employers tell me, no, we're telling them they're an independent contractor, so they must be. No, it doesn't work that way. What matters is the reality on the ground. If someone works for you regular hours and you tell them what to do and they work consistently, that person is an employee. And then they've been misclassified as independent contractors. John, in my experience, most people that believe that they're independent contractors are actually employees in the eyes of the law, meaning they have the rights of employees, vacation pay, overtime pay, and of course, severance. Very common mistake that employers make.
Mistake number 4 that employers can make, Lior, is assuming incorrectly that probationary periods are automatic. It just happens with everybody. A lot of viewers would agree that as well, right?
I absolutely agree with that. A lot of employers think, well, you just started a job, so clearly you must be on probation. No, probation is not automatic. The law does not create an automatic probationary period. You're only on probation if you sign an employment agreement that puts you on probation, that specifically states you are on probation. Otherwise, you are not. And by the way, for most people, probation can really only last for 3 months, because after that, if the employee is let go, they're owed compensation, they're owed severance. But even in the first month, 2, 3, if you are let go, you may well be owed a lot of severance unless you sign that employment agreement putting you on probation. So remember, it's not automatic at all.
Let's get to one more of these for the topic on this show, Lior, mistakes that employers make because they just sometimes don't know any better, and that is putting someone, or at least letting someone go for cause when they don't really have justification to do so.
There's a distinction between having a reason to let someone go and having just cause. Those are very different things. The employee may have done something wrong. That may give the employer a reason to let them go, but it doesn't mean that it gives them just cause. Just cause happens if the employee is guilty of very significant misconduct, if they did something so bad that it's not possible to let them go, and not possible to do anything other than let them go. It's the capital punishment. And in that situation, you don't have to pay severance, but you need to warn them in advance. You have to give them an opportunity to improve. And one incident is almost never going to be cause. So that's often how we see a wrongful dismissal. Employer says we have a reason, therefore we're letting you go for cause, not paying you severance, when in fact they can't do that. If you supposedly have been let go for cause, chances are it's not proper. Chances are you are owed significant severance.
As we mentioned and showed you in the first segment of the show, Lior, we'd like to get to some of the phone calls from our long-running radio show, which you can catch Sundays at 1 p.m. on News Talk 1010. We'll get to the second phone call for this show right now.
I worked for this company like 25 years, and a new company bought them out. They said there's going to be no changes, all this stuff, and then everything changed. They wanted us to sign contracts and stuff, all like 100 of us, right? So I didn't do it. Then they laid me off, and now they terminated me and gave me 2-week pay. So I don't know what to do.
So here's how this works. Number one, when the new company takes over and that new company is bought, if he continues working with that company, they inherit his service. So that means that when he's let go, he's going to be owed severance based on the 25 years he had before, not just for the period of time that he worked for the new company. And if you're a new employer, wants you all of a sudden to sign a new employment agreement, be very concerned about that. There could be huge problems in there, clauses and terms that are problematic, that limit your rights, are going to cost you money. So don't just sign that agreement. He was right not to do that. And if he loses his job as a result, yeah, he's going to be owed severance. And not 2 weeks. After 25 years, that could easily be 24 months' pay. Very important to remember that when there's a sale of a business, What happens to your seniority? Carries through. And watch out for that new employment agreement. Always. It's never good news. It's almost always problematic for the employee.
Let's take a short pause, Lior. On the other side, we'll talk about managers' mayhem after mat leave and time limits on severance. That is coming up, but you can always reach out, as we always tell you to do, 1-888-861-4555 and ask@employmentlawyer.ca. Lots more Ask a Lawyers on the way right here on CP24. Hang on.
You have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
And welcome back to Ask a Lawyer here on CP24. As always, John Scholes, your host, and with me, employment lawyer Lior Samfiru from EmploymentLawyer.ca. We always tell you to reach out if you have any questions during, after the show, anytime. 1-888-861-4555. Ask@employmentlawyer.ca. I want to get to a question, Lior, as well, that came across your desk very recently in a minute. But phone calls, again, our radio show happens on News Talk 1010, Sundays at 1 p.m. Please call into the show. Your call, if it's interesting and it is going to answer some questions for all of our viewers, may appear on the show at a later date, so feel free to do that. So we'll get to phone call number 3 right now, Lior. Listen up.
Currently on mat leave, supposed to go back to work here in the next couple months, and I've been told that my position manager role no longer exists due to budget cuts. Been there for 10 years with the agency. They've offered a severance. The severance that came out, I don't think reflects the time that I've been there. It gets the 6 weeks termination, but nothing comparable to what I was making, $70,000.
Well, you're shaking your head, John, as you should, and we all should, because anytime we have a parent, mother or father, that's on a parental leave and they're about to come back and the job doesn't exist anymore, we should be concerned. We should be worried, because there's a really good chance that that may be illegal before we even talk about severance. And the reason for that, an employer has that legal obligation to bring the person back if at all possible. It's rare when they can say, no, we just don't have the job. So right off the bat, I'm thinking this could be a human rights violation. This could be an employment standards violation, in addition to a wrongful dismissal. So that could be easily something that's happening here. But obviously we don't know more right now, so we can address the thing that we do know, which is severance. This person was offered 6 weeks, and the question is that enough? Hint, it's not. But let me actually show you why it's not enough. We can go, as we did before, to our severance calculator. You can find that, of course, at pocketemploymentlawyer.ca. Again, pocketemploymentlawyer.ca. Let's see what that actually gives us. 32 years of age, been there for 10 years. It's a long time for someone that's 32 years of age, and was offered 6 weeks severance. No, not at all. You see on the bottom of the screen there that she's owed easily right around 12 months of severance. 12 months. Now, I'm not a mathematician, but that's a pretty big difference between 6 weeks and 12 months. And by the way, this is even before or even separate from the whole issue of the parental leave and the obligation to bring her back. So that's why we call. That's why we use the severance calculator, because we may be owed those amounts as well.
Again, reach out at pocketemploymentlawyer.ca, free and anonymous, and of course access to that severance calculator, which over 2 million Canadians have used. Again, pocketemploymentlawyer.ca. Lior, question that came across your desk recently, want to get to this. It says, I've been watching your show these past few weeks and now realize that I should have been given pay after I was fired. Can I still call you? It happened almost 2 years ago.
Well, you said that word almost twice, as you should have, because that is the key word. There is a 2-year limitation period when it comes to losing your job and pursuing your entitlements. It's 2 years from when you were let go. It's not kind of 2 years or 2 years and a day. It's a strict 2 years. So in this case, it's almost 2 years. If that's less than 2 years, yes, you can still pursue that. The key here, of course, is also not having signed that severance offer. If you sign that severance offer, whether it's been 2 years or 2 weeks, it's too late to do anything about it, okay? So you really don't want to wait, and you certainly don't want to sign off on that severance offer. But if you haven't signed off and you're listening to the show and you realize, wait a second, I didn't know I was owed these amounts. I want to get what I'm owed. If it's been 2 years or less, you can still pursue it. call me as soon as possible, not the day before the 2 weeks expired. Give me some time to do what I need to do, but you do have 2 years.
All right, we'll take one more short pause. On the other side, radical change to remote work. That is coming up. In the meantime, that number, call it, use it, 1-888-861-4555, and email is ask@EmploymentLawyer.ca. We'll continue with more Ask a Lawyer here on CP24.
You have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
All right, welcome back to Ask a Lawyer. A couple minutes ago here, John Scholes, and with me, of course, Lior Samfiru from EmploymentLawyer.ca. He's an employment lawyer. He actually does still practice law, Lior. We talk about that in between all the radio, the TV, all the live streaming you do on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube, which we're going to get to right now. I know you're a busy guy, but here comes that question. And it says, I was hired for a remote-only position a few years ago, working exclusively from home. Now they're telling me I must come into the workplace 3 days a week. Can they do that?
So remember the general rule. Your employer can't make significant changes to the terms of employment. So if you were hired to work remotely, to change that, so now you have to come in several days a week, that's a significant change. So no, your employer can't do that. They can't just decide to change the deal and now you're an in-office employee. That can result in a constructive dismissal. You can't physically, of course, stop your employer from doing that, but you can absolutely say no, and that could be easily a constructive dismissal. Now, if you were hired to work in the office during the pandemic, you were working remotely, and now your employer wants you to come back, then they're allowed to do that because the pandemic was a temporary situation. But if you've always been remote, you can't be made to come back to work. That's a huge, huge change. So you're well within your rights to say, thanks, but no thanks. I want the deal that we've agreed on.
Good stuff, Lior. And with that, we are just about out of time. And I'll tell you how to reach out beyond this and future shows as well. Simply go to cp24.com/askalawyer. And our radio shows can be found across the country, but specifically News Talk 1010. You can catch that Sundays at 1 p.m. It's an hour long. Always encouraging you to reach out, grab a phone, call us, get on air, and your phone call might appear on this show. And the phone number to wrap it up before we go, 1-888-861-4555. Ask@EmploymentLawyer.ca as well. Everything you need to know about constructive dismissal, that is on next week's show. So please come back and join us again, another edition of Ask a Lawyer. Thank you so much for sticking around.